power, obey neither policy. No one is neutral.
If you look him in his eye and ask him how he decides which
New kind of mean in him. He is angry.
I didn't kill those men if that's what they think.
I'm older now than my father ever was. This may be the only thing.
God is all powerful. He cannot be all good.
Don't stop him. You know what stops him? The fist.
It's all that gives them hope.
Now God!
What happens when the world's greatest hero becomes humanity's biggest threat? USA Batman and Superman collide in an epic battle filled with action secrets and shocking twists. Stay till the end on Sonu Hub for amazing facts, hidden details, and a complete movie review. Batman Superman. Dawn of Justice is a 2016 American superhero movie based on the famous DC Comics heroes Batman and Superman. It was directed by Zack Snyder and written by Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer. The movie is a sequel to Man of Steel 2013 and the second movie in the DC Extended Universe, DCEU. Ben Affleck plays Batman while Henry Cavill returns as Superman. The cast also includes Amy Adams, Jesse Eisenberg, Diane Lane, Lawrence Fishburne, Jeremy Irons, Holly Hunter, and Gal Gadot. This is the very first live-action movie where Batman and Superman appear together on the big screen. It also marks the first live-action movie appearance of Wonder Woman. In the story, the evil genius Lex Luthor comes up with a plan to turn Batman against Superman. Lex is completely obsessed with taking Superman down and does everything he can to make the two heroes fight each other. The movie was officially announced during the 2013 San Diego Comic-Con, not long after Man of Steel came out. Zack Snyder said the movie was inspired by Frank Miller's famous Batman comic, The Dark Knight Returns, but he also made it clear that the story would be mostly original and not a direct copy of the comic. The Batman in this movie is a brand new version of the character, completely different from Christian Bale's Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy. This movie acts as a fresh reboot for Batman in the DC movie universe. The story also borrows some ideas from the Superman comic, The Death of Superman. Pre-production started at East Los Angeles College in October 2013. Filming officially kicked off in May 2014 in Detroit, Michigan. The crew also shot scenes in Illinois and New Mexico before wrapping up production in December 2014. Batman v Superman. Dawn of Justice had its world premiere at the Auditorio Nacional in Mexico City on March 19, 2016. It was released in theaters across the United States on March 25, 2016 by Warner Bros. Pictures. The movie earned around $874 million worldwide, while its production budget was estimated to be between $250 million and $325 million. It became the 7th highest grossing movie of 2016 and also had the biggest opening weekend ever for a superhero movie at the time it was released. Critics gave the movie mixed reviews, with some people loving its darker style, while others had problems with the story. Later in 2016, an extended version called the Ultimate Edition was released for home viewing. This version includes 31 extra minutes of footage that adds more scenes and explains parts of the story in greater detail. The next movie in the series, Justice League, was released on November 17, 2017. The movie starts with a flashback to Bruce Wayne's childhood. After the funeral of his parents, young Bruce runs away through the woods overwhelmed with sadness. He suddenly falls into a deep cave filled with bats. Instead of hurting him, the bats begin flying all around him, lifting him back toward the surface. Before this, Bruce had watched his parents, Thomas Wayne and Martha Wayne, get shot and killed by a mugger right in front of him. That heartbreaking moment changed his life forever. About 18 months after Superman's massive battle with General Zod in Metropolis, the world is still dealing with the damage. Thousands of people died during the fight, and entire buildings were destroyed. Bruce Wayne was in Metropolis that day and saw the destruction with his own eyes. One of Wayne Enterprises' office buildings collapsed during the battle, killing many of his employees and friends. After seeing so much death and destruction, Bruce becomes convinced that Superman is too powerful and could become a huge danger to humanity. Having protected Gotham City as Batman for nearly 20 years, Bruce believes someone needs to stop Superman before it's too late. At the same time, a group of freelance divers discovers a huge piece of kryptonite at the bottom of the Indian Ocean. The strange green rock came from the destruction caused during Zod's attack on Earth. Meanwhile, Daily Planet reporter Lois Lane travels to Africa to interview a warlord named General Amajak. Her photographer, Jimmy Olsen, is secretly working with the CIA and is carrying a tracking device. When Amaja's men find the device, Jimmy is immediately executed. Amaja's own security chief, Anatoly Knyazev, secretly betrays him. Anatoly kills Amajak and all of his soldiers before Superman arrives to rescue Lois. Even though Superman had nothing to do with the killings, the people blame him for the deaths of the villagers. Back in Metropolis, Daily Planet editor Perry White begins running stories that question Superman's actions, making public opinion even more divided. The United States Congress decides to investigate Superman's actions. Senator June Finch leads the hearings, listening to emotional stories from people whose lives were destroyed during Superman's battles. Many believe Superman's power is too dangerous and that nobody should have that much control without being held accountable. Clark Kent, who is secretly Superman, starts investigating Batman. After learning that Batman brutally brands criminals and sometimes uses torture during his missions, Clark believes Batman has become a violent vigilante who is operating outside the law. He writes articles for the Daily Planet exposing Batman's actions. At this point, Batman and Superman both see each other as dangerous people who create more problems than they solve. Bruce discovers that Russian weapons trafficker Anatoly Knyazev has been meeting with billionaire Lex Luthor, the owner of LexCorp. Bruce suspects Lex is trying to secretly bring a dirty nuclear weapon into Gotham City. Bruce follows Anatoly to a nightclub, secretly copies the data from his phone, and later discovers that the phone was constantly sending information directly to Lex Luthor's private servers. At the same time, Lex Luthor tries to convince Senator Finch to let him import the kryptonite found in the Indian Ocean. He claims he only wants it as protection in case another Kryptonian attacks Earth. Senator Finch refuses to approve the request. However, Lex already knows that kryptonite is one of the few things that can seriously weaken or even kill Kryptonians because he has secretly been experimenting on General Zod's dead body using a small kryptonite sample. Lex doesn't give up. He secretly makes deals with people working under Senator Finch and gains access to both Zod's body and the abandoned Kryptonian scout ship. Lex believes Earth needs stronger protection against powerful superhumans, so he begins making plans involving people with incredible abilities. Bruce later attends a fancy party hosted by Lex Luthor. There, he meets Diana Prince, a mysterious antiques dealer who is actually Wonder Woman. While everyone is distracted, Bruce secretly plans a hacking device inside Lex Corp's computer system to steal encrypted files from the company's servers. Back in the Batcave, Bruce starts decrypting the stolen files. While waiting, he falls asleep and has a terrifying dream about a dark future where Superman has become a ruthless ruler after the world has been destroyed. Batman leads a small group of rebels fighting against Superman's forces. Suddenly, a mysterious man appears through a glowing portal and warns Bruce that Lois Lane will be extremely important in the future. He also tells Bruce to find the others before disappearing just as quickly as he arrived. After finishing the decryption, Bruce discovers that Lex Luthor isn't only studying kryptonite. Lex has also been collecting information on several metahumans living around the world. One of the files belongs to Diana Prince, showing an old photograph of her during World War I, proving she hasn't aged in over 100 years. Bruce also learns that the large kryptonite shipment recovered from the Indian Ocean is being transported to LexCorp. He decides he must steal it before Lex can use it. Bruce even tells his loyal butler Alfred Pennyworth that if Superman ever turns against humanity, he plans to turn the kryptonite into weapons powerful enough to kill him. Batman attacks the convoy carrying the kryptonite, but Superman suddenly appears and blocks his path. Superman warns Batman to stop his violent actions and stay out of trouble. Because of Superman's interference, the kryptonite shipment safely reaches Lex Luthor. Even though Batman fails to stop the delivery, he secretly places a tracking device on the truck so he can locate the kryptonite later. During Superman's congressional hearing, Senator Finch questions him about all the destruction linked to his actions. Unknown to everyone, Lex Luthor has secretly planted a bomb inside the courtroom. The bomb explodes, killing almost everyone in the building except Superman. Superman is devastated because he realizes he failed to save innocent people. Filled with guilt and believing the world may be better off without him, he leaves Earth and goes into self-imposed exile. With Superman gone, Batman breaks into LexCorp and successfully steals the kryptonite. He begins building special weapons designed specifically to fight Superman, including a powerful armored suit, kryptonite smoke grenades, a grenade launcher, and a spear with a kryptonite tip. Meanwhile, Lex enters the Kryptonian scout ship, learns how its advanced alien technology works, and starts creating a horrifying creature by combining General Zod's Kryptonian DNA with his own human DNA. Lex then kidnaps Martha Kent, Clark Kent's adoptive mother. He reveals that everything happening has been part of his master plan. By spreading fear and distrust, he successfully turned Batman and Superman against each other. Lex gives Superman an impossible choice: kill Batman or Martha will die. Superman tries to explain the situation to Batman and asks him for help, but Batman refuses to listen and attacks him. After a brutal fight, Batman weakens Superman with kryptonite and finally pins him down with the kryptonite spear. Just before Batman delivers the final blow, Superman begs him to save Martha. Hearing his mother's name shocks Bruce because his own mother was also named Martha. Lois Lane arrives and quickly explains that Martha is Superman's mother and that Lex has kidnapped her. Bruce finally realizes Superman was never his enemy, determined not to let another innocent mother die. Batman rushes off to rescue Martha while Superman flies to confront Lex Luthor. Lex activates his backup plan by releasing the monster he secretly created from his own DNA and General Zod's body. The creature is incredibly powerful and nearly unstoppable. Just when Batman and Superman seem completely overwhelmed, Diana Prince reveals that she is Wonder Woman and joins the battle. The three heroes fight together against the monster, but every time it absorbs energy, it becomes even stronger. The heroes eventually realize the monster is weak against kryptonite. Superman grabs the kryptonite spear while Batman and Wonder Woman distract the creature, knowing the spear will weaken him as well. Supermom flies straight through the monster and stabs it with the kryptonite weapon. The monster dies, but with its final attack, it drives one of its sharp bone spikes into Superman, killing him as well. After the battle, Lex Luthor is arrested and sent to prison. Batman visits him behind bars and warns Lex that he will always be watching him. Lex laughs and says Superman's death has left Earth defenseless, warning Batman that much more powerful alien threats are already on their way to the planet. The world gathers to honor Superman's sacrifice. A public memorial is held in Metropolis, while Clark Kent is officially declared dead. Bruce Wayne, Lois Lane, Martha Kent, and Diana Prince attend Clark's private funeral in Smallville. Martha gives Lois an envelope containing the engagement ring Clark had planned to give her after the funeral. Bruce tells Diana that he wants to build a team of powerful metahumans using the information found in Lex Luthor's files so they can protect the world now that Superman is gone. As everyone leaves the cemetery, the dirt resting on top of Clark Kent's coffin slowly begins to float into the air, hinting that Superman may not be gone forever. Casting the core of the ensemble and returning faces from Man of Steel, Henry Cavill returned as Clark Kent Superman, the role that defined his entry into the DC Extended Universe with Man of Steel. Cavill had already undergone intensive physical preparation for the earlier film, building a physique that matched the comic ideal of the last son of Krypton. For Batman v Superman, he repeated a rigorous weight training and diet regimen that brought him to approximately 220 pounds, emphasizing both power and the vulnerability required for a Superman under public and political scrutiny. Cavill's casting continuity was never in serious doubt. Once the sequel was greenlit, the filmmakers wanted the same grounded, conflicted hero who had emerged from the destruction of Metropolis. Amy Adams likewise returned as Lois Lane, the investigative journalist whose relationship with Clark provided the emotional through line. Adams had established Lois as a sharp, independent reporter rather than a damsel, and her presence ensured narrative consistency between the two films. Diane Lane reprised Martha Kent, the adoptive mother whose quiet strength and moral compass remained central to Clark's identity. Lawrence Fishburne returned as Perry White, the Daily Planet editor whose gruff authority grounded the newsroom sequences. Harry Lennox continued as General Swanwick, later revealed in expanded material to have deeper connections. And Christina Wren appeared again as Major Carrie Farris. These returning performances created a stable foundation against which the new characters could collide. Kevin Costner's Jonathan Kent appeared in dream and flashback sequences, reinforcing the parental influence that shaped Superman's values. The decision to retain the Man of Steel cast was practical and thematic. It allowed the film to treat the earlier events as recent history rather than distant mythology, making the public's fear of Superman feel immediate and earned. Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne Batman. The search for Batman began with a clear mandate. Zack Snyder and the producers wanted an older, battle hardened Bruce Wayne who had already spent years fighting crime in Gotham, a man closer to the weary figure of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns than the origin story heroes of previous cinematic cycles. Charles Rowan, one of the producers, stated that Affleck was the first actor approached. The criteria were specific maturity, physical stature, acting range, and the ability to project both the polished billionaire and the brutal vigilante. Affleck stood 6'4", towering slightly over Cavill's 6'1", a deliberate visual choice so that Batman would appear to look down on Superman in their confrontations. Rowan emphasized the desire for a taller, rugged figure who showed signs of life and had lived a hard life. Affleck had just won Oscars for Argo and possessed the dramatic credibility the filmmaker sought. Affleck himself was initially reluctant. He later recounted that his first reaction was that he did not fit the traditional mold of a young Batman discovering his mission. Snyder countered by describing an older, really fucked up, morally compromised Batman on the edge of bankruptcy, both financial and ethical. That description, combined with the influence of The Dark Knight Returns, changed Affleck's mind. He has said the concept of a heavyweight boxer in the 12th round, torn up and at wit's end, excited him. Chris Terrio's involvement as screenwriter further reassured him. Affleck trusted Terrio's writing and felt the project had the necessary creative pieces. Warner Bros. Warned him about the likely online backlash, advising him to stay off the internet after the announcement. The backlash arrived immediately and intensely. Fans launched petitions, flooded social media with criticism, and compared the choice unfavorably to earlier. Batman. Affleck later admitted the reaction hurt, though he noted he was less devastated than he might have been a decade earlier. He framed the decision partly as a desire to make a film his children could be proud of. Other names had been considered or discussed in the industry. Josh Brolin later revealed he had been in serious conversations for an older, raspier Batman and found the idea interesting. Though he accepted Snyder's final choice, Matthias Konartz was a backup option. Snyder prepared mock-ups of him in the cowl while Affleck was still deciding. Scott Adkins auditioned, later remarking that Affleck was always going to get the part because of his Oscar credentials. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Armie Hammer, and others appeared in early speculation. Snyder has said he became convinced of Affleck after drawing a cowl over a photocopy of the actor's face with a Sharpie, an instinctive visual confirmation that the casting felt right. Once locked in, Affleck committed fully to the physical transformation and the darker characterization. The batsuit itself was redesigned as a more fabric-based, tactical ensemble rather than heavily armored plating, reflecting Snyder's preference for a grounded yet formidable look. A mechanical armored suit was also developed for the climactic fight. Underscoring the technological edge Batman brought against a godlike opponent. Gal Gadot as Diana Prince, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's introduction marked the first live-action cinematic portrayal of the character in a major feature. The search was extensive. Casting directors and Snyder interviewed and tested hundreds of actresses worldwide before narrowing the field to a final group of 6 for camera test. Gal Gadot, then known primarily for her roles in the Fast and Furious franchise and her background as a former Miss Israel and Israeli Defense Forces soldier, emerged as the clear choice. Snyder and the team had seen her in the action films and noted her combination of physical presence, height, 5'10", and an intangible quality of strength paired with kindness. Laura Kennedy, one of the casting directors, highlighted Godot's lack of fear and her real world military experience as assets that translated into authenticity on screen. Gadot's path to the role involved secrecy. Warner Brothers asked her to audition without revealing the character. After an initial meeting with Snyder that went well, she was invited to a camera test opposite Ben Affleck. Only later did Snyder call to confirm she was being considered for Wonder Woman. Godot has described the moment of realization as almost overwhelming. She then waited 7 weeks for the final decision, cycling through anxiety and the stages of grief before receiving the offer. In the screen test, she held her own against Affleck's commanding presence. Snyder later recalled Affleck's reaction as, "Whoa, that girl is something else," which served as a strong positive signal. Godot underwent an intensive training regimen, practicing martial arts and gaining approximately 17 pounds of muscle to achieve the Amazonian physique. Snyder praised her ability to be both fierce and kind, the exact duality the character required. Producer Charles Rowan confirmed the film would treat Wonder Woman as a demigod, daughter of Zeus, aligning with certain comic interpretations and giving her mythic weight even in limited screen time. Her appearance in Batman v Superman was designed as an introduction rather than a full origin, setting up future standalone stories while establishing her as a peer to the two male leads. Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. Jesse Eisenberg's casting as Lex Luthor generated its own wave of controversy, though of a different flavor from Affleck's. Fans expected a bald, middle-aged corporate titan in the mold of earlier portrayals, or the comics' classic image. Eisenberg, known for cerebral, high-strung roles such as Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, represented a deliberate modern reinvention, a young tech-savvy, manic billionaire whose intelligence manifested as erratic, almost theatrical unpredictability. The backlash was swift, with online commentators declaring the choice a failure before any footage appeared. Eisenberg's interpretation leaned into eccentricity and psychological instability rather than cold, calculating menace. The filmmakers wanted a Luthor who could manipulate both Batman and Superman through ideology, media, and personal vendetta rather than pure physical threat. Tawa Okamoto was cast as Mercy Graves' Luthor's assistant, providing a poised, loyal counterpoint to his volatility. The decision to cast a younger, more volatile Luthor reflected the film's broader interest in contemporary power dynamics, corporate influence, political theater, and the collision of godlike power with human ambition. Jeremy Irons as Alfred Pennyworth and supporting roles. Jeremy Irons brought gravitas and dry wit to Alfred Pennyworth. This Alfred was not merely a butler, but a sophisticated, technologically adept partner who managed Bruce Wayne's affairs and provided tactical and emotional support. Irons' classical training and screen presence allowed the character to function as both confidant and moral counterweight to Batman's increasing ruthlessness. Holly Hunter was cast as Senator Finch, a principled politician who challenges Superman's unchecked power and later confronts Luthor's machinations. Her performance grounded the political subplot in recognizable human stakes. Scoot McNairy played Wallace Keefe, a disabled survivor of the Metropolis battle, whose bitterness becomes a tool in Luthor's scheme. Colin Malvi portrayed Anatoly Knyazev, KG Beast, a mercenary enforcer. These supporting roles were filled with actors capable of conveying trauma, ideology, and quiet intensity without requiring large amounts of screen time. Additional casting filled out the world. Brandon Spink appeared as young Bruce Wayne in the opening sequence that revisits the murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne, Lauren Cohan as Martha Wayne. Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Thomas Wayne. Michael Cassidy played a version of Jimmy Olsen, whose fate underscored the film's darker tone. Wunmi Mosaku appeared as Kahina Ziri, and various real-world media figures Anderson Cooper, Charlie Rose, Soledad Oberon, Nancy Grace, Neil deGrasse Tyson appeared as themselves or in similar capacities, blurring the line between the film's universe and contemporary media culture. Cameos and brief appearances by Ezra Miller as Barry Allen the Flash, Jason Momoa as Arthur Curry Aquaman, and Ray Fisher as Victor Stone. Cyborg planted seeds for the larger Justice League narrative. Jenna Malone was cast as Jeanette Clyburn in material that appeared in the Ultimate Edition home release. Patrick Wilson provided the voice of the president. These choices expanded the cinematic universe while keeping the focus on the central conflict. The casting process and creative philosophy. Casting directors Laura Kennedy and others described the work as a combination of psychology, matchmaking, and careful reading of the material. They had to balance the director's vision, the studio's commercial expectations, and the actor's own processes. For Superman, the earlier search that led to Cavill had taken years. Kennedy recalled working with him over a long period before the final commitment. For Batman, the priority was an actor who could embody both the public face of Bruce Wayne and the private violence of the Bat. For Wonder Woman, the search prioritized an actress who could project strength without sacrificing warmth or approachability. Screen tests were used not only to evaluate performance but to test chemistry. Godot opposite Affleck being a key example. Physical transformation was non-negotiable for the principal heroes. Cavill's continued bulk. Affleck's conditioning for an older but still formidable fighter, and Godot's muscle gain all served the visual language of the film. Snyder's overall approach favored actors who could handle heightened material without losing emotional authenticity. The script by Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer required performers capable of delivering philosophical dialogue, quiet character moments, and large-scale action. The ensemble was assembled to support a story about power, accountability, fear, and the possible cooperation among extraordinary individuals. Returning cast members provided continuity and emotional anchors. New cast members introduced friction, mythic scale, and the seeds of a team. Controversies surrounding Affleck and Eisenberg reflected the intensity of fan investment in these characters. History has shown similar reactions to earlier Batman and Joker castings that later became celebrated. The filmmakers proceeded with their choices, trusting that the finished performances and the film's visual and thematic coherence would ultimately define the reception. Physical preparation, costume integration, and on-set dynamics once cast. The principal actors entered intensive preparation phases that went beyond typical fitness regimens. Cavill's training emphasized functional strength and the ability to move convincingly under the weight of the Superman suit and the demands of wire work and practical effects. Affleck's preparation focused on conveying the wear of years of combat while still delivering explosive power in fight sequences. The armored batsuit for the final confrontation required additional strength and endurance training. Godot's regimen combined martial arts training with hypertrophy work so that the Wonder Woman armor and combat choreography would look natural rather than ornamental. Costume designers and the visual effects teams collaborated closely with the actors so that the suits enhanced rather than restricted performance. The fabric-based batsuit allowed greater mobility and a more human silhouette. Wonder Woman's armor balanced classical inspiration with practical fighting capability. Superman's suit retained the iconic look while accommodating Cavill's increased mass. On set, the casting choices influenced the working atmosphere. Affleck and Cavill's height difference and contrasting physicalities shaped the blocking of their confrontations. Gadot's presence introduced a different energy, calm authority mixed with warrior intensity, that altered the dynamic whenever she shared the frame. Iron's Alfred provided a steady, almost paternal counterpoint that grounded the more operatic elements. Eisenberg's unpredictable energy as Luther created a chaotic center around which the other performances orbited. Supporting players such as Hunter and McNary brought grounded realism to the political and personal trauma subplots. The ensemble's range allowed the film to move between intimate character scenes, large-scale destruction, and mythic confrontations without collapsing into a single tone, expanding the universe through strategic casting beyond the central trio and Luther. The casting of future Justice League members served a dual purpose, rewarding attentive viewers with brief but memorable introductions and establishing the broader world in which Batman and Superman operated. Ezra Miller's Barry Allen appeared in a high-speed, almost playful sequence that hinted at the character's personality and powers. Jason Momoa's Aquaman emerged from the ocean with primal force, establishing a presence that felt both ancient and contemporary. Ray Fisher's Cyborg was introduced through technological and personal trauma, setting up a character whose struggle with identity and machinery would become central later. These appearances were calibrated carefully, long enough to register, short enough not to distract from the main conflict. The decision to cast established or rising actors with distinctive physical and performative qualities ensured that each hero felt singular rather than interchangeable. Secondary roles further populated the world. The casting of real journalists and media personalities as themselves or similar figures reinforced the film's interest in public perception and the machinery of narrative control. Military and political roles were filled with actors who could convey institutional authority and moral complexity. Background players in Metropolis and Gotham sequences were chosen to reflect the diverse populations of those cities, making the destruction and its aftermath feel concrete rather than abstract. Controversies, public reaction, and the filmmakers' resolve. The announcement of Affleck's casting produced one of the most visible fan backlashes of the decade. Online petitions, critical editorials, and social media campaigns questioned his suitability, often referencing his earlier work in Daredevil or simply asserting that he did not match a preconceived image of Batman. Eisenberg's casting drew parallel criticism focused on physical appearance and age. Snyder, Rowan, and the studio maintained that the choices served the specific version of the characters they intended to present: an older Batman shaped by loss and moral compromise, a young Luthor defined by intellect and instability rather than traditional villainy. Affleck has spoken about the personal impact of the reaction and the studio's advice to avoid reading the commentary. Over time, many viewers who initially resisted the casting came to accept or even praise Affleck's portrayal of a world-weary Bruce Wayne, while opinions on Eisenberg's Luthor remained more divided. Gadot's casting, by contrast, was largely celebrated once footage appeared, with her physicality and screen presence quickly becoming a point of consensus. The casting process also reflected larger industry patterns. Major franchise roles now generate instantaneous global reaction, and studios must weigh artistic vision against the risk of alienating core audience. In this case, the filmmakers prioritize the internal logic of their story, juxtaposing a young, idealistic Superman with an older, cynical Batman, introducing Wonder Woman as a figure of mythic balance, and reimagining Luthor as a product of contemporary tech culture over strict adherence to any single comic book template. The result was an ensemble that felt deliberate rather than assembled by checklist. Integration of performance and theme. Every major casting decision served the film's thematic concerns. Affleck's Batman embodied the fear that unchecked power, even when used for good, can produce catastrophic collateral damage. Cavill's Superman carried the burden of being both savior and potential threat, a figure whose very existence unsettles human institutions. Gadot's Wonder Woman represented a longer historical perspective, someone who had witnessed human conflict across centuries and still chose engagement. Eisenberg's Luthor personified the human capacity to manipulate fear and ideology for personal dominance. Iron's Alfred supplied the voice of experience and restraint. The returning Man of Steel cast members kept the emotional continuity of family, journalism, and military perspective alive. Supporting players filled in the human cost of the Black Zero event and the political machinery that sought to regulate or exploit metahuman power. The physical and performative contrasts among the leads, height, age, energy, training, backgrounds, reinforced these themes visually and dramatically. When Batman and Superman finally clashed, the difference in their bodies and fighting styles was not merely spectacle. It was the embodiment of two philosophies colliding. When Wonder Woman entered the fray, her presence shifted the balance from binary conflict toward the possibility of alliance. The casting made those shifts feel earned because the actors themselves brought distinct histories and screen personae to the roles. Legacy of the casting choices within the larger franchise, the decisions made for Batman v Superman shaped the subsequent trajectory of the DC film universe. Affleck continued as Batman in Justice League and related projects, his version of the character remaining a point of reference and debate. Gadot's Wonder Woman launched a successful solo film and became one of the most recognizable faces of the franchise. Cavill's Superman remained the central figure of hope even as the larger narrative evolved. The brief introductions of Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg paid off in later ensemble films. Eisenberg's Luthor, though polarizing, established a particular tone of chaotic intelligence that influenced how the character was discussed. The supporting ensemble provided texture and continuity that later projects could build upon or diverge from. In practical terms, the casting demonstrated both the risks and the potential rewards of reinterpreting iconic roles. By choosing an older Batman, a modern Luthor, and a Wonder Woman who combined classical beauty with genuine combat credibility, the filmmaker signaled that their universe would not simply replicate earlier cinematic or comic versions. The process involved long searches, multiple screen tests, physical transformations, and a willingness to weather public criticism. The resulting ensemble was large, varied, and deliberately constructed to support a story about power, fear, accountability, and the difficult possibility of cooperation among extraordinary individuals. Every major role was filled with an actor whose presence altered the chemistry of the scenes they inhabited, ensuring that the film's conflicts and alliances felt rooted in specific human and superhuman personality rather than abstract symbols. Production development and pre-production, the roots of a Batman Superman crossover picture stretch back further than most fans realize. As early as August 2001, Warner Bros. Hired screenwriter Andrew Kevin Walker to develop a project under the working title Batman vs. Superman, with German filmmaker Wolfgang Petersen attached to direct. Walker's script leaned into a bleak, morally heavy tone that studio executives felt was too dark for a tentpole release, prompting Warner Bros. To bring in Akiva Goldsman for a rewrite that was internally referred to by the codename Asylum. During this early era, the studio's casting wish list reportedly included Johnny Depp as the Cape Crusader and Josh Hartnett as the Man of Steel. Cameras were meant to roll in early 2003 for a shoot expected to last 5 to 6 months, aiming for a summer 2004 theatrical bow. Those plans unraveled when Peterson chose to leave the project to make the historical epic Troy instead, and Warner Bros. Pivoted to fast-tracking Catwoman with Halle Berry as a stopgap superhero release. Years later, in 2008, studio production chief Jeff Robinoff candidly acknowledged that had 2006's Superman Returns performed better, a Batman-Superman team-up might already have reached theaters by then. Instead, the studio's strategy shifted toward relaunching Superman on his own, independent of any crossover ambitions. That relaunch arrived in the form of 2013's Man of Steel, directed by Zack Snyder and produced by Christopher Nolan, whose Dark Knight trilogy had redefined the superhero genre commercially and critically. According to Snyder, the idea of pitting Superman against Batman began to take shape organically during story conferences about what kind of opponent could plausibly challenge a being as powerful as Superman after his catastrophic battle with General Zod. Snyder has said he began casually raising the notion that a clash with Batman could make for compelling material, while stressing that he had not taken the Man of Steel job as a covert stepping stone toward a Batman story. Rather, the pairing crystallized only after the writers had genuinely worked through who else could conceivably stand toe-to-toe with Superman. Warner Bros. Made the sequel official around the time Man of Steel opened in June 2013, confirming that Snyder would return to direct and that David S. Goyer, who had co-written Man of Steel, would pen the follow-up screenplay with the studio, initially eyeing a 2015 release window. The announcement was formalized a month later at the 2013 San Diego Comic-Con, where Snyder confirmed the project would be titled Batman vs. Superman and would depict the two icons meeting on screen for the first time. Goyer and Snyder were credited with co-developing the story, with Goyer handling the script itself. Nolan, meanwhile, stayed involved in an advisory capacity as an executive producer. Notably, Snyder and Nolan weighed the possibility of stitching Man of Steel's continuity together with Nolan's own Dark Knight trilogy, but ultimately abandoned the idea because The Dark Knight Rises had concluded with the implication that Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character John Blake would assume the Batman mantle from Christian Bale's retiring Bruce Wayne. Snyder reasoned that tying the two franchises together would create confusing continuity problems, since audiences would naturally expect to see Bale's Wayne squaring off with Superman rather than a successor. Early messaging suggested the new film would draw heavily on Frank Miller's seminal graphic novel, The Dark Knight Returns, though Snyder later clarified in November 2013 that the film would not function as a direct adaptation of that story, explaining that adapting it faithfully would have required an entirely different version of Superman than the one established in Man of Steel. Instead, the plan was to introduce Batman into the world that this particular Superman already inhabited. The project also carried historic significance beyond the Batman-Superman pairing. It would mark the first time Wonder Woman appeared in a live-action theatrical film, a character Warner Brothers had reportedly been trying to develop into her own movie as far back as 1996. In December 2013, with Goyer occupied by other commitments, Warner Bros. Brought in Chris Terrio, fresh off his Academy Award win for Argo, to rework the screenplay. Terrio has spoken about the layers of influence he wove into the script, citing not only Nolan's Batman trilogy but also Italian semiotician Umberto Eco's 1972 essay on the mythic function of Superman, as well as W. H. Auden's poem Musée des Beaux-Arts, which juxtaposes the mundane rhythms of ordinary life against the grandeur of mythological suffering. Terrio has described his conception of the two heroes through a classical lens, framing Batman as an underworld figure akin to Pluto and Superman as a sky god akin to Apollo, and suggesting that their rivalry stemmed from something more fundamental than mere manipulation by a villain, an inherent tension baked into their very natures. Early drafts reportedly considered incorporating both the Joker and the Riddler as antagonists, but Snyder ultimately excised both characters from the finished screenplay. The film's eventual title, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, was made public in May 2014. Snyder explained that using the abbreviated V rather than the full-worded versus was a deliberate choice, meant to subtly signal that the film was not simply a straightforward slugfest movie. Henry Cavill, for his part, pushed back on the idea that the film was merely a continuation of the Man of Steel storyline, describing it instead as its own distinct entity that both introduced Batman and widened the scope of the shared cinematic universe that Man of Steel had started. Forbes later observed that what had begun as a direct Man of Steel sequel had effectively been reshaped into a launching pad for a future Justice League film and potentially a standalone Batman project as well. In a detail connected to a real-world legal settlement, this became the first Batman film to formally credit Bill Finger as a co-creator of the character alongside Bob Kane, following an agreement reached with Finger's heirs. Years afterward, in April 2021, Terrio revealed that his screenplay had never actually carried the title Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice internally, and Snyder confirmed that the final title was chosen by studio executives, though he pushed hard for the shortened V. Alternative titles the creative team had floated included Justice League Foundations, Justice League Rising, and the more poetic Son of Sun and Night of Night. Casting was one of the most closely scrutinized aspects of the film's development. Several Man of Steel cast members returned, including Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, Kevin Costner, Diane Lane, Lawrence Fishburne, Harry Lennox, and Christina Rehn. The new ensemble brought in Ben Affleck as Batman, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, and Jeremy Irons as Alfred Pennyworth, alongside Ray Fisher as Cyborg, Jason Momoa as Aquaman, Ezra Miller as The Flash, and Tao Okamoto as Luthor's aide Mercy Graves. Scoot McNairy and Callan Mulvey rounded out the cast as Wallace Keefe and Anatoly Knyazev, respectively, while Jenna Malone was cast as STAR lab scientist Jeanette Clyburn, a character whose scenes were held back exclusively for the later extended home media cut. The casting of Ben Affleck as Batman generated an unusually fierce wave of public backlash when it was announced, with numerous online petitions springing up calling for the studio to recast the role. Detractors argued that Affleck simply did not project the physical menace associated with previous screen Batman. Not everyone shared that skepticism, Pop Matters writer J.C. Maciek III was an early defender of the choice and stood by that position even after the film's release. This was actually Affleck's second outing playing a comic book vigilante on screen. having previously starred as Daredevil in the 2003 film of the same name. Interestingly, his own dissatisfaction with how that earlier film turned out was part of what motivated him to take on Batman, seeking a chance to do right by a superhero role. Affleck was reportedly hesitant at first, feeling that he did not fit the archetype typically associated with Batman, but he warmed to the idea once Snyder walked him through the concept and assured him the take would diverge meaningfully from Nolan's interpretation of the character. Nolan himself had a hand in the casting process, and Affleck was in fact the very first actor Snyder approached for the part. Other names considered for Batman at various points included Ryan Gosling, Joe Manganiello, Richard Armitage, Max Martini, and Matthew Good. And Snyder additionally held discussions with Josh Brolin, Christian Bale, who had played the role across Nolan's trilogy, admitted he would have been open to reprising the part after The Dark Knight Rises, though he maintained that his version of the character belonged to its own self-contained story and confirmed he was never formally approached to return. Jason Momoa, meanwhile, actually auditioned for the role of Batman before being cast as Aquaman instead. Snyder's stated intention was to depict an older, more world-weary Batman who could serve as a compelling contrast to a younger Superman, a character who carries the scars of 2 decades spent fighting crime while still retaining the public-facing charisma expected of billionaire Bruce Wayne. This vision was itself inspired by The Dark Knight Returns, in which Batman is depicted well into his 50s. Affleck has echoed this description, characterizing his version of the character as older, warier, and more cynical than prior portrayals. A Batman who has been worn down by prolonged exposure to Gotham's criminal underworld. Rather than adopting the deep gravelly growl used by past screen Batman, Affleck's Batman relies on a voice modulating device to disguise his voice, on the reasoning that a recognizable billionaire public figure like Bruce Wayne would risk being identified by his natural speaking voice alone. For Lex Luthor, Snyder explained that casting Jesse Eisenberg opened the door to explore a fresh, unexpected dynamic rather than replicate prior screen versions of the character. Other actors considered for the role included Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hanks, Joaquin Phoenix, Bryan Cranston, and Adam Driver. Eisenberg has spoken about consciously trying to distance his performance from earlier portrayals by actors like Gene Hackman and Kevin Spacey, reasoning that any close resemblance would inevitably invite unfavorable comparisons. He worked to give the character what he called a tragic backstory and an authentic emotional interior, collaborating closely with Terrio to root Luthor's motivations in something that felt psychologically real rather than cartoonishly villainous. Eisenberg described Luthor as a first-order narcissist whose troubled, competitive, and vengeful nature drives him to see Superman not merely as someone to be destroyed, but as a genuine existential threat to humanity. And he has called the role one of the most creatively rewarding of his career, offering a rare opportunity to play a genuinely complex character within a massive studio blockbuster. Despite this, Eisenberg's youth, he was around 30 during filming, and slighter physical stature drew criticisms from fans who felt he lacked the gravitas typically associated with the character. Wonder Woman's casting proved similarly contentious. Producer Charles Rowan confirmed that this cinematic incarnation of the character would follow her New 52 comic book origin, establishing her as a demigoddess and literal daughter of Zeus, rather than the character's earlier, more mystical origin as a figure sculpted from clay and given life by the gods. Actresses including Olga Kurilenko, Jamie Alexander, and Elodie Yung were reportedly considered before Gal Gadot ultimately won the role. Interestingly, Gadot had previously been offered a different part in Man of Steel, that of the Kryptonian warrior Fora, but had turned it down because she was pregnant at the time, a decision that inadvertently positioned her to be cast as Wonder Woman later on. Fans initially criticized Gadot's comparatively slight build as mismatch with the more physically imposing warrior aesthetic typically associated with Wonder Woman in the comics. In response, Gadot detailed the training regimens she undertook to build a physique more faithful to the source material, reportedly packing on around 17 pounds of muscle while training across multiple martial arts disciplines. Snyder praised Gadot's casting by describing Wonder Woman as one of the most powerful female characters ever created and calling Gadot both a gifted actress and someone possessing an almost magical on screen quality suited to the part. The film additionally marked significant firsts for several other Justice League characters. It was Ray Fisher's feature film debut and the first time Cyborg had ever appeared in a live action production, with the character originally envisioned as playing an increasingly prominent role in future DC films. It likewise served as Aquaman's live action theatrical debut. Snyder has also revealed he came close to casting Adam Driver as Dick Grayson, the character who would become Nightwing, and Carla Gugino as Catwoman, though neither casting ultimately came to pass. Gugino instead ended up voicing a Kryptonian artificial intelligence called Kelor. Once the film reached theaters, much of the earlier casting skepticism softened considerably. Both Affleck and Gadot drew substantial praise for their performances, even as the film overall received a mixed to negative critical reception, a somewhat unusual dynamic in which the lead actors were singled out for approval within an otherwise divisive project. Costume design for the film was overseen by Michael Wilkinson, who had also designed the costumes for Man of Steel. He revised Superman's suit to feel updated and distinct for this new chapter of Snyder's shared universe, while still maintaining visual continuity with the earlier film. Batman's first suit in the film draws direct visual inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns and, breaking from prior live-action Batman films, was constructed from cloth rather than rigid armor plating. It was molded to match the physique of fitness model Rossano Rea. A second, more heavily armored batsuit, distinct from the fabric-based version, was unveiled separately at Comic-Con, intended for use during Batman's climactic confrontation with Superman. Wonder Woman's costume, also revealed at the 2014 San Diego Comic-Con, notably desaturated the traditionally vivid red, blue, and gold color scheme most versions of the character are associated with. Aquaman's design leaned into tattooed patterns, reminiscent of Maori body art, paired with a suit rendered in gold, black, and silver armor tones. Production design extended to an entirely reimagined Batmobile created by production designer Patrick Tatopoulos, which blended the sleek lines of classic comic book Batmobiles with the heavier militarized high suspension aesthetic of the tumbler vehicle from Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. The vehicle measured roughly 20 feet in length and 12 feet in width. Even small details received attention to authenticity. The eyeglasses worn by Cavill in his Clark Kent scenes were custom pieces made by British eyewear designer Tom Davies. Filming cinematographer Larry Fong, a frequent Snyder collaborator who had previously shot 300 Watchmen and Sucker Punch, joined the production in September 2013. The earliest photography for the film actually predates the primary shoot by several months. On October 19, 2013, The crew filmed an American football sequence at East Los Angeles College, depicting a game between the fictional Gotham City University and its rival Metropolis State University. Later that same month, construction began on a new iteration of the Kent family farm set, building on the version originally used in Man of Steel. Principal photography involving the main cast formally began on May 19, 2014 in Detroit, Michigan, although Gal Gadot's scenes as Diana Prince actually started rolling a few days earlier on May 16. Michigan proved to be an enormously significant location, both creatively and economically. The production reportedly injected around $199 million into the state's economy during filming. Somewhat surprisingly, one of the film's most emotionally weighty sequences, a state funeral scene set at Arlington National Cemetery and featuring a ceremonial tribute from the United States Army, was not actually filmed in Virginia at all. It too was shot in Michigan using green screen compositing techniques to recreate the setting. Filming later expanded to Chicago, Illinois, beginning in November 2014, along with additional work at the Michigan Motion Picture Studios and the Eli and Edith Broad Art Museum on the campus of Michigan State University. The production also filmed in Yorkville, Illinois, made use of footage captured in the South Pacific, and shot additional material in New Mexico. Several key sequences, including the harrowing flashback depicting the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents, were captured using large format IMAX cameras to maximize visual impact. Notably, the production had originally planned to shoot certain sequences in Morocco, but those plans were scrapped and relocated to New Mexico instead due to safety concerns stemming from the 2014 Ebola outbreak in West Africa. Principal photography officially wrapped on December 5, 2014, closing out a shoot that had spanned roughly 7 months across multiple US states and international locations. A number of behind the scenes, casting and production choices affected which actors physically appeared on set. Michael Shannon, who had played General Zod in Man of Steel, did not return to film any new scenes for this installment, despite Zod's corpse playing an important plot role throughout the story. Instead, the deceased Zod scene on screen was created using the physique of fitness model Greg Plitt combined digitally with a headshot of Shannon to preserve visual continuity with the previous film. Motion capture actor Robin Atkin Downes performed both the physical performance and vocal work for the monstrous creature that appears during the film's climax. Although never explicitly named on screen, the creature was later confirmed to be Doomsday, a classic DC Comics villain famous in the comics for having killed Superman. Secrecy around the character was maintained so tightly during production that Downes himself reportedly did not know which character he was portraying until the film's second theatrical trailer was released to the public. Snyder later confirmed that Doomsday was intended to factor into the broader DC Extended Universe going forward, framing the creature as having his own mythology still left to explore in future films. Beyond the primary cast, the film incorporated a wide range of supporting performances and cameos designed to enrich the shared universe. Jeffrey Dean Morgan appeared uncredited as Thomas Wayne, and Lauren Cohan portrayed Martha Wayne, together depicting Bruce Wayne's murdered parents in flashback. Patrick Wilson, who would go on to play Ocean Master in the later Aquaman films, voiced the President of the United States without appearing on screen. Michael Cassidy played a CIA agent version of Jimmy Olsen. Several actors reprised roles established in Man of Steel, including Harry Lennox as Secretary Calvin Swanwick, and Christina ran as Major Carrie Farris, alongside Kevin Costner returning as Jonathan Kent. Joe Morton appeared as Silas Stone, father to Ray Fisher's cyborg. The production even folded in a handful of real-world political and media figures sitting U.S. Senator Patrick Leahy made a cameo as the fictional Senator Purrington, while Senator Debbie Stabenow appeared as the governor of New Jersey. Prominent media personalities including Neil deGrasse Tyson, Soledad O'Brien, Anderson Cooper, Charlie Rose, Dana Bash, Andrew Sullivan, and Vikram Gandhi all appeared as themselves, largely within the film's framing of Superman as a subject of intense media and public scrutiny. Additional smaller roles included Sami Rotibi as General Amajak and Wunmi Mosaku as Kahina Ziri, a witness who testifies before Congress against Superman. Not every filmed sequence made it into the theatrical cut. Jana Malone's performance as STAR, lab scientist Jeanette Clyburn, was excised entirely from the version shown in cinemas, alongside scenes involving Man of Steel supporting characters played by Coburn Goss as Father Leon, Joseph Cranford as Pete Ross, and Emily Peterson as Lana Lang. All of these trimmed scenes were later reinstated for the extended home media cut. Talk show host Jon Stewart likewise makes a cameo appearance exclusive to that extended version. In a further effort to knit the shared universe together, the film includes a photograph depicting Diana Prince during World War I, in which Chris Pine, Syed Tagmawi, Ewan Bremner, and Eugene Brave Rock appear as Steve Trevor, Samir, Charlie, and Chief Napi respectively, all characters who would go on to feature prominently in the subsequent Wonder Woman solo film. Post-production. Following the completion of principal photography in December 2014, the film moved into an extensive post-production phase, overseen by Snyder and his effects teams, a process complicated by the sheer scale of the visual effects. Work required for the climactic battle sequences involving Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and the Doomsday Creature. The film's screenwriter Chris Terrio later spoke publicly about his frustration with the editing choices made for the theatrical cut, characterizing the decision to trim roughly 30 minutes of footage from his and Snyder's preferred version as an act of sabotage against the finished work. That missing material would eventually resurface in the extended Ultimate Edition, prepared for home media release later in 2016, which restored the trimmed subplots, including Jenna Malone's entire storyline as Jeanette Clyburn, and pushed the runtime from 151 minutes in theaters up to 182 minutes on disc, a difference of just over 31 minutes. The extended cut's additional material was substantial enough to shift the film's home media rating from the theatrical PG-13 to an R rating. Music. Hans Zimmer, the composer behind the acclaimed scores for Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy as well as Man of Steel, returned to compose the music for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Zimmer has said he set himself the specific challenge of avoiding any reuse of the musical themes he had previously created for Batman in the Nolan films, wanting this incarnation of the character to have a wholly distinct musical identity. Tom Holkenborg, better known professionally as Junkie XL, who had contributed additional music to Man of Steel, also returned for this project and took a leading role in shaping Batman's new musical theme. Initially, the plan had been for Zimmer to focus his attention primarily on Superman's musical material, while Junkie XL independently handled the composition of Batman's theme. But the two composers ultimately ended up collaborating directly on the final version of the Batman theme together. Zimmer has spoken candidly about how difficult he found it to locate a genuinely new musical angle for telling this particular story, and following the film's release, he announced his retirement from composing for superhero films altogether, a decision he later walked back. The film's official soundtrack album was released on March 18, 2016 through Water Tower Music, just ahead of the film's theatrical debut. Beyond Zimmer and Junkie XL's original score, the film also incorporates a number of pre-existing pieces of music and source cues. These include Kangling, an instrument made from a human thigh bone, a traditional piece performed by monks of the Deep Tichok Ling Monastery in Dharamshala, two Cole Porter standards, Night and Day and Every Time We Say Goodbye, performed in the film by lounge singer Richard Cheese, a waltz movement from Dmitri Shostakovich's Suite for Variety Orchestra, performed by the Royal Concert Gebo Orchestra under the direction of conductor Riccardo Chailly, and an arrangement of Amazing Grace, performed by musician John Allan, as well as in a separate rendition by the Canadian Scottish Regiment Pipes and Drums, together with the United States 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing Band, released theatrical Warner Bros. Mounted an enormous marketing campaign behind the film, with the overall promotional spend estimated at around $165 million. The earliest promotional footage debuted at the 2014 San Diego Comic-Con, where Snyder personally introduced material intended to be exclusive to attendees. A teaser trailer had originally been scheduled for a limited theatrical rollout on April 20, 2015, but those plans were upended when the trailer leaked online on April 16. Rather than let the leaked version dominate the conversation, Snyder opted to release the trailer officially via Twitter just hours later. That teaser received a mixed reception from audiences, but a subsequent, more substantial trailer shown at the 2015 San Diego Comic-Con landed far more successfully, reportedly earning a standing ovation from the convention crowd. Forbes contributor Mark Hughes described the early marketing materials as effectively establishing several core threads: the public's growing distrust and fear of Superman following the destruction seen in Man of Steel, Batman's simmering anger toward Superman and determination to confront him directly, and Wonder Woman's involvement in the eventual team-up battle alongside the other two heroes, often referred to informally as the Trinity. Extensive licensing and merchandising partnerships accompanied the marketing push. Warner Bros. Consumer Products struck deals with major toy and lifestyle brands, including Mattel, Lego, Rubies, Funko, Thinkway Toys, Hot Toys, Junk Food, BioWorld, Pez, Seiko, and Converse, among numerous other partners, to produce a sprawling slate of film-branded merchandise. Automaker Fiat Chrysler served as a major promotional partner as well, providing a special edition Jeep Renegade in exchange for what amounted to a near-exclusive product placement arrangement. Aside from Bruce Wayne's Aston Martin, virtually every vehicle appearing in the film came from a Chrysler-owned brand such as Dodge, Jeep, Ram, or Iveco. Tie-in publishing efforts included a companion novel titled Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice Crossfire, published by Scholastic and set as a prequel to the events of the film, as well as a set of 4 mini-comics packaged inside Batman v Superman branded General Mills cereal boxes. Shoppers who purchased a themed Doritos Family Fun mix at Walmart received a separate tie-in comic titled Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Upstairs, Downstairs. On the gaming side, Rocksteady Studios released downloadable content for Batman Arkham Knight that let players use the film's version of the Batmobile and Batsuit, and a standalone mobile tie-in endless runner game titled Batman vs Superman: Who Will Win, launched on March 16, 2016, courtesy of Warner Bros. International Enterprises. The film's third official trailer premiered on Jimmy Kimmel Live on December 3, 2015 and was generally well received. Forbes' Scott Mendelson memorably characterized it as tapping into a Saturday morning cartoon sense of nerdy wish fulfillment. Molly Driscoll of the Christian Science Monitor suggested the footage indicated the film would continue a broader industry trend of using comic book source material to explore timely social themes. Graham McMillan of The Hollywood Reporter drew an explicit contrast with Marvel's contemporaneous Captain America: Civil War, suggesting Batman v Superman might function almost as an inverse of that film's premise, where Civil War built toward a fractious showdown between allied heroes. This trailer instead depicted heroes setting aside their differences to unite against a shared threat, a dynamic McMillan found comparatively fresher. That said, the trailer also drew some criticism for revealing plot elements some felt should have stayed under wraps, with commentator Rob Tourneau arguing the trailer had clearly been engineered to appeal to as broad an audience as possible in order to maximize opening day box office rather than cater strictly to devoted fans. Rather than purchase advertising time during Super Bowl 50, Warner Brothers instead partnered with Turkish Airlines to produce a pair of Batman v Superman branded commercials. The Hollywood Reporter's McMillan noted that these spots worked in cultural and geographic references tied to the two heroes' respective home cities, packed with Easter eggs meant to reward both longtime comic readers and newcomers alike. Jesse Eisenberg's appearance as Lex Luthor in these ads drew particular praise, with Cinema Blend's Dirk Libby noting that Eisenberg's charming, welcoming billionaire businessman persona in the commercials felt notably different from the more overtly unsettling version of the character glimpsed in the film's other promotional clips. The fourth and final trailer arrived on February 11, 2016, described by the Verge's Quam Opam as distinctly intense in tone. Forbes' Mendelson speculated that Warner Brothers likely would not have released this additional trailer at all had the December trailer landed more favorably with audiences, framing the final spot as an attempt to close out the marketing campaign on a stronger note. Entertainment Weekly's Jonathan Dornbush felt the footage succeeded in positioning Batman as an independent crime-fighting force in his own right, while also deepening the sense of his internal, existential conflict with Superman. Additional promotions rolled out in the weeks before release. In February 2016, Warner Bros. Teamed with Doritos on a code entry sweepstakes tied to specially branded chip packaging, offering winners movie tickets, tech prizes, and a trip to the New York premiere. A separate charitable partnership with Omese invited fans to donate toward a chance at winning what was billed as the ultimate Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice experience, benefiting three non-profit organizations nominated respectively by Affleck, Cavill, and Eisenberg. The grand prize included premiere tickets for the winner and a guest, plus the chance to either fly in a helicopter with Cavill or ride in the Batmobile alongside Affleck. On March 20, 2016, NASCAR drivers Jimmy Johnson and Dale Earnhardt Jr. of Hendrick Motorsports piloted Superman and Batman themed race cars respectively at the Auto Club Speedway. Release scheduling for the film shifted multiple times during development. Warner Bros. Initially announced in November 2013 that the film would open on July 17, 2015. That plan changed in January 2014 when the studio pushed the release back to May 6, 2016, citing a need to give the filmmaking team adequate time to properly execute the film's visually complex story. The date shifted again in August 2014 when Warner Brothers moved the release forward to March 25, 2016. A studio insider characterized the decision as reflecting confidence rather than avoidance, explaining that despite this date placing the film on the same weekend as Marvel's Captain America Civil War under the original May scheduling, the studio saw March 2016 as an especially favorable release window in its own right. Reports also indicated Warner Brothers weighed releasing the film in the large format 70mm print format, given that portions of it had been captured using 65mm IMAX cameras. The film held its world premiere at the Auditorio Nacional in Mexico City on March 19, 2016, followed the next day by a New York City premiere at Radio City Music Hall. In the aftermath of the 2016 Brussels terrorist bombings, Warner Brothers initially cancelled the red carpet portion of the film's London premiere out of caution, but ultimately reversed that decision and proceeded with the event for the benefit of fans. The film opened theatrically in both the United States and the United Kingdom on March 25, 2016, presented in 3D. Its release was coordinated to open simultaneously across North America, China, and Japan, the world's three largest film markets, alongside numerous additional international territories, with Poland serving as a notable exception due to the local custom of theaters remaining closed on Good Friday. Altogether, the film debuted across roughly 30 season screens spanning nearly every major overseas market, encompassing 61 countries in total. Domestically, it opened in approximately 4,242 locations, of which about 585% were equipped for 3D projection. The release additionally included 390 IMAX screens, 470 premium large format locations, 150 D-Box motion seat theaters, and 10 venues showing 70mm film prints. Home media Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice made its way to home media formats later in 2016 in the form of its extended Ultimate Edition, which restored roughly 30 to 31 minutes of footage cut from the theatrical version, bringing the total runtime to approximately 182 minutes. This expanded cut incorporated previously deleted subplot material, most notably Jenna Malone's full performance as STAR, lab scientist Janet Clyburn, whose research assists Lois Lane in tracing the origin of the bullet used in an early African massacre sequence, and in uncovering that Wallace Keefe's wheelchair had been deliberately lined with lead, explaining why Superman's X-ray-like vision failed to detect the bomb concealed within it during the congressional hearing sequence. The added material was also said to more thoroughly clarify Lex Luthor's manipulative role in engineering the entire chain of events that pushes Batman and Superman into conflict. Because of the added violent and thematically mature content, the Ultimate Edition carried an R rating in contrast with the theatrical cut's PG-13 rating. Warner Home Video made the Ultimate Edition available across multiple physical and digital formats. A digital HD version of the extended cut became available on June 28, 2016. Several weeks ahead of the physical media release, the full slate of physical releases spanning Ultra HD Blu-ray, Blu-ray 3D, Standard Blu-ray, and DVD combo packs arrived on July 19, 2016. The Ultra HD Blu-ray combo pack packaged together an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc containing the Ultimate Edition remastered in 4K with high dynamic range, a standard Blu-ray disc containing the theatrical cut along with the bulk of the bonus special features and digital copies of both versions of the film. The Blu-ray 3D combo pack instead paired a 3D presentation of the theatrical cut with a standard high-definition presentation of the Ultimate Edition, while the basic Blu-ray combo pack and a 2-disc special edition DVD offered scaled-down configurations of the same overall content. Bonus material bundled with the home media release included a making of style featurette title exploring the future of the DC extended universe, offering glimpses of Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, Cyborg and David Ayers, then upcoming Suicide Squad, alongside other behind the scenes extras, though the release notably lacked a filmmaker audio commentary track. The Blu-ray editions also featured a Dolby Atmos audio mix specifically remastered for home theater setups capable of directional and overhead sound, while remaining fully compatible with more conventional surround sound configurations. Years later, a newly remastered 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray edition of the Ultimate Edition was reissued on March 23, 2021, aligning with renewed interest in Snyder's DC work following the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League reception box office Batman v Superman. Dawn of Justice opened to a colossal box office haul that immediately established multiple records, even as it soon revealed a front-loaded performance pattern that would define much of the discussion around its commercial run. In the United States and Canada, the film earned $166 million during its opening weekend, marking the 8th biggest opening of all time at that point and surpassing The Dark Knight Rises' previous debut of $160. 9 million. Globally, the film opened to 422.5 million, at the time the second biggest worldwide opening in Warner Bros. History and the fourth biggest of all time across the industry, making it only the fourth film ever to cross the $400 million threshold in a single global opening weekend. IMAX screens alone contributed $36 million worldwide from 945 locations, the third largest IMAX opening on record behind Star Wars, The Force Awakens and Jurassic World. Despite this historic start, the film's performance dropped off unusually sharply. Domestically and internationally, it posted the worst Friday to Sunday decline ever recorded for a superhero film up to that point, falling 58%, a mark that eclipsed the previous record set by 2015's Fantastic Four. The trend accelerated in the film's second weekend, which saw an even steeper decline widely described by trade press as historic. Friday to Friday earnings fell by 81.2%, described by some outlets as among the largest such drops ever recorded for a major blockbuster, while the overall second weekend gross fell 68.4% despite facing no significant new competition at the box office, the second largest such decline for any major superhero release, trailing only 2003's Hulk. Box Office Mojo's Brad Brevet noted that even the more pessimistic pre-release estimates, which had forecast a decline somewhere between 58 and 68%, still undersold just how steep the actual drop turned out to be. Forbes' Scott Mendelson similarly observed that a film's true commercial health is often better measured by its second and third weekends than its opening, and noted that despite a still substantial $50 million plus second weekend, the film's overall trajectory showed essentially no staying power. That pattern continued into the third weekend, which saw a further 54.3% decline, prompting Brevet to conclude in a follow-up analysis that the film's box office legs were proving unusually short. Advance ticket sales ahead of release had actually outpaced comparable blockbusters, including The Dark Knight Rises, The Avengers, and Furious 7, and pre-release worldwide opening projections ranged between $300 and $340 million across more than 35,000 screens. By its second weekend, the film had crossed $50 million in cumulative IMAX ticket sales, reaching a total of $53.4 million from 571 IMAX screens. Warner Bros. Domestic distribution chief Jeff Goldstein characterized the film's overall box office run as a fantastic result by any reasonable measure, while box office analyst Jeff Bock noted that, excluding Nolan's two Dark Knight films and inflation adjusted grosses for Tim Burton's earlier Batman films, this release stood as the highest grossing entry in DC's cinematic library, up to that point outperforming Man of Steel by more than $200 million. Bock further argued that the film had successfully relaunched DC's cinematic universe on a commercial level. Financial analysts had reportedly pegged $800 million as the revenue figure the film needed to reach in order to recoup its full investment. While the film exceeded that mark, it nonetheless fell short of crossing the symbolically important $1 billion threshold, leading some commentators to frame the film's overall financial outcome as something of a disappointment relative to expectations. This underwhelming result contributed to Warner Bros. Decision in May 2016 to establish DC Films, a dedicated executive division tasked specifically with overseeing DC Comics based film properties. Modeled loosely on the standalone structure Marvel Studios occupies within the larger Walt Disney Studios organization. In its final tally, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice grossed $330.4 million in North America and $544 million across other international territories, for a worldwide total of $874.4 million, making it the seventh highest grossing film of 2016 globally. Deadline Hollywood, factoring together the full range of costs and revenues associated with the production, estimated the film's net profit at $105.7 million in the run-up to release. Industry analysts and insiders had offered a wide range of opening weekend projections, with many pegging the domestic debut somewhere between $120 million and $140 million, and some more bullish estimates reaching as high as $185 million. Warner Bros. Own internal projections were notably more conservative, hovering closer to $110 million. One unnamed rival studio box office analyst speculated to Deadline Hollywood that if the film's pre-release trajectory genuinely mirrored that of The Dark Knight Rises, an opening above $180 million was plausible. The film also became the top pre-selling superhero release in Fandango's history. At that point, surpassing both The Dark Knight Rises and Avengers: Age of Ultron and accounting for 90% of the ticket platform's weekend sales. Internal survey data suggested that the introduction of Wonder Woman was a significant draw, pulling moviegoers to buy tickets, contributing an estimated $20 million to $25 million in advance sales alone. Thursday preview screenings brought in $27.7 million from around 3,800 theaters, the largest such total of 2016 to that point, the biggest Easter weekend preview figure on record, the second biggest preview total ever for a superhero film behind The Dark Knight Rises, and the seventh largest of all time overall, with $3 million of that total coming from IMAX screenings alone, itself a new Easter weekend record. On its opening day, the film earned $81, $59 million from 4,242 theaters, including preview totals, representing the biggest pre-summer opening day ever recorded up to that point, the second biggest superhero opening Friday, and the fourth biggest single day gross in box office history, with $9 million of that sum coming from IMAX presentations. Excluding Thursday previews, the film's standalone Friday gross of $53.89 million still ranked as the fifth largest Friday opening ever recorded. The film then fell 37.8% from Friday to Saturday, the second steepest such single-day decline ever recorded for a superhero release, trailing only the 40% drop experienced by The Dark Knight Rises. Its full opening weekend total of $166 million set records for the largest March opening and largest pre-summer opening of all time, the biggest Easter weekend opening ever, the second biggest opening in Warner Bros. History, the largest opening ever for any DC Comics based film, and the eighth largest opening weekend of all time across the entire industry. At the same time, the film also set the opposite kind of record, registering the steepest Friday to Sunday decline ever recorded for a superhero film, surpassing the prior mark of 48% set by 2015's Fantastic. For IMAX screenings contributed 11% or roughly $18 million of the opening weekend's total gross from 308 theaters, the fifth largest IMAX weekend haul ever recorded at the time, tied with Avengers. Age of Ultron, while 3D presentations accounted for 40% of ticket sales, or roughly $68 million, with Real D 3D screenings specifically contributing $47 million. Premium large format screens generated a further $17.6 million or 10% of the total, including $3.6 million from Cinemax XD auditoriums across 475 locations. The momentum carried briefly into the following week. The film set a new record for the biggest March Monday gross of all time with $15.05 million, a 55% drop from Sunday that nonetheless broke the previous record of $10.8 million set by the Hunger Games, and it likewise set the record for the biggest March Tuesday with $12. $2 million. By the end of its first full week, cumulative domestic earnings reached $209 million, the 11th biggest opening week total of all time, a figure that alone surpassed the entire lifetime domestic gross of Batman Begins. Despite earning $15.335 million on its second Friday, that figure represented an 2% decline from its opening Friday, a new record for the steepest Friday to Friday drop ever recorded for a comic book adaptation. A gap made even more dramatic when factoring in the $27.7 million contributed by the original Thursday preview screenings. The second weekend overall saw a 69.1% decline, with the film earning $51.3 million across 4,256 theaters, a slight expansion of 14 additional locations amid weak critical reviews and mixed audience word of mouth. This made it the seventh steepest second weekend decline ever recorded for a superhero or comic adaptation film, and the steepest such drop since X-Men Origins. A Wolverine's 69% decline in 2009, a particularly striking result given the film faced essentially no direct new competition that weekend and even benefited from favorable school calendar conditions, with roughly 30% of K-12 schools closed for spring break and 9% of colleges on break as well, according to data from ComScore. That decline also tied for the fourth largest such drop ever recorded among films that had opened above $100 million, matching a mark previously set by the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2. By its third weekend, the film had been overtaken at the domestic box office by the modestly budgeted comedy The Boss, falling a further 54% to $23. $3 million. Ultimately, the film's total domestic gross of roughly $330 million amounted to just 99 times its opening weekend total of $166 million, a notably weak multiplier when compared with Man of Steel's own 2.28 multiplier from 3 years earlier. Commentators drew parallels between this pattern and that of other prior DC branded releases such as Watchmen, Green Lantern, and Man of Steel itself, all of which had opened to record setting numbers before falling off sharply in subsequent weeks amid lukewarm critical reception and mixed audience reaction. A similar front-loaded trajectory would later play out with DC's next release, that same year Suicide Squad in August 2016, although that film's decline ultimately proved somewhat less severe than Dawn of Justice's had been. Internationally, pre-release, projections had estimated an opening weekend in the range of $180 million to $200 million, though Deadline Hollywood cautioned at the time that such figures were early estimates derived largely from the historical performance of comparable films in similar markets. The film opened in 10 countries on Wednesday, March 23, 2016, earning $7 million and claiming the #1 box office spot in every one of those markets across approximately 5,900 screens. The rollout expanded the following day to 38 additional countries, adding $33.1 million from 19,700 screens for a combined two-day total of $44 million. On March 25, the film opened in its remaining 17 territories, contributing $67.2 million and bringing the three-day cumulative total to $115.3 million, spanning 62 countries and more than 30 screens. By the close of the full opening weekend on March 27, the international total had climbed to $256.5 million, all from 66 countries and over 40,000 screens, at the time the largest superhero opening weekend ever recorded internationally, the biggest overall March opening on record, the second largest international opening in Warner Bros. History, and the fifth largest international opening of all time across the industry. The film's international IMAX opening of $18 million ranked as the second largest ever at that point, trailing only Jurassic World's $23.5 million. 3D presentations accounted for a striking 59%, or roughly $149.86 million of the international opening weekend. Gross, led by particularly strong 3D adoption in China 98%, Germany 88%, Brazil 81%, and Russia, France 51%. As with the domestic market, the film's international performance fell off dramatically in its second weekend. Its second Friday internationally dropped 72% to $19.2 million, with the steepest individual market declines recorded in the United Kingdom 77% and China 87%, while the broader second weekend international gross fell 66% overall to $85.25 million. Even with that steep decline, the film managed to remain the top grossing film at the international box office for 3 consecutive weekends running. Performance varied considerably by individual market. In Mexico, the film posted the biggest opening day in Warner Bros. History and the second biggest opening day of all time in that market, earning $8 million and including record-breaking midnight screening numbers. It also achieved the single biggest opening day ever recorded in Brazil at $3.5 million. And the biggest opening day ever for a superhero film, specifically in Germany, at $2.8 million. Other notable opening day figures included the United Kingdom and Ireland 9 million combined, Australia 2.5 million, India 2.54 million, Russia 1.9 million, South Korea 1.7 million, Japan 1.2 million, and the United Arab Emirates and Hong Kong each around $1.1 million. China proved to be an especially important market, with the film earning $22 million on its opening day alone, including roughly $1.34 million from preview screenings, marking the biggest single opening day in Warner Brothers history in China and the sixth biggest Hollywood opening day there of all time, though some local Chinese sources place the actual figure somewhat lower, around $20 million.